Welcome back. Thanks for being with us here on Morning Live. Now, the Apartheid-era Victims Family Group have welcomed a decision by the National Prosecuting Authority and the Directorate for Priority Crimes, who have indicated that they will collaborate in the investigation of the prosecution of apartheid-era crimes. Now, this follows the recent decision by the Supreme Court of Appeal I beg your pardon, to refuse former apartheid policeman Joao Rodrigues' application for a stay of prosecution for his role in the murder of anti-apartheid activist Ahmed Timol. Now, this means that Rodrigues will finally stand trial for Timol's murder nearly 50 years since it happened. And the families have, however, expressed disappointment that it took the Supreme Court of Appeal's decision for law enforcement agencies to finally act. So for more on this, we joined on the line or via Zoom now by Imtiaz Cajee, nephew of former anti-apartheid activist Ahmed Timol. Imtiaz, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Morning, Sakina, and thanks for hosting me.
I must say, I read this statement rather bemused at what the NPA and the Hawks are now saying in this regard. But firstly, let's start with your uncle's case and the fact that Joao Rodrigues now will stand trial as per the SCA ruling. Let's talk about that first before we get to what will happen moving forward.
Yes, Sakina, let's not forget that the SCA dismissed his application. This after the full bench of the South Gauteng High Court dismissed his application for a permanent stay of prosecution, I think around May 2019. But they've granted him an application to appeal, which simply means that in most certainty, Sakina, he will appeal this ruling to the Constitutional Court in Braamfontein. And once that appeal takes place and a ruling is given, then only will his criminal trial commence. So we've got absolutely no idea as to the actual date for his criminal trial. But let's just focus on the Ahmed Timol matter, Sakina. 1996, my grandmother testifies, none of the apartheid-era police officers apply for amnesty or are subpoenaed. A few years later, I ascertained from the TRC investigator, Piers Pichot, that he met the same Joao Rodrigues in a very short meeting. Rodrigues requested a lawyer to be present. Piers then recommended to the TRC that Rodrigues get subpoenaed to testify at the TRC. Unfortunately, this does not happen. Excuse me, there's no explanation given. Pichot resigns from the TRC, and Rodrigues and his former apartheid-era colleagues, in most certainty, would have watched my grandmother testify at the 1996 hearing. 2003, President Mbeki sets up the Priority Crimes Litigation Unit, PCLU, within the National Prosecuting Authority in terms of a proclamation. I contact the PCLU, Sakina, during the same period, provide a substantive amount of information to the same advocate, Chris McAdam, who then asked me to provide more information to him. I'd also given him some information that had come to me pertaining to the location of Joao Rodrigues. The NPA then came back to me and simply said that they were not able to trace Rodrigues. And now we know that Rodrigues was living. In 2005, Sakina, I located senior interrogators Johannes Hendrik Gloy and Johannes Zakaria van Niekerk. I gave the information to Deborah Petter and a third-degree crew. They visited both Gloy and van Niekerk, which clearly demonstrate that they could be found if the NPA were really interested. I had 3 telephonic conversations with Gloy in Afrikaans. He was very clear that my grandparents had passed on. He could not understand why was I pursuing the matter. And he made it very clear, Sakina, that I should go and look at the inquest records of 1972. And then he threatened to lay charges against me if I continued calling him. So again, Gloy and van Niekerk were available. The NPA made absolutely no effort to pursue this matter. We then hear that there was a backdoor amnesty process initiated by President Mbeki. The Foundation for Human Rights and a number of families opposed this, and the court supported this application to dismiss the backdoor amnesty process. Around 2013, Vusi Pukole makes an affidavit in the Nokutura Similani matter, talking of political interference when he was embarking on investigating the poisoning claims or the poisoning of Reverend Frank Chikani, referring to political interference from the Mbeki administration, which ultimately led him to resign from the NPA. 2015, I go to the Foundation for Human Rights, again conducting my own investigations, providing a substantial amount of evidence at their disposal. 2016, Sakina, with the late Advocate George Bezos. We meet the NDPP at the NPA offices in Silverton. Private investigator Frank Dutton provides a presentation on reopening the Ahmed Timol matter as well as the inquest into Dr. Neil Aghan. October 2016, the Minister of Justice announces the opening of the Ahmed Timol inquest. And as we know, on the 26th of June 2017, the Ahmed Timol inquest commences. But there again, the NPA failed to find Joao Rodrigues when we know very well he was living. If it was not for Rodrigues' daughter, Tilana Standa, who had contacted me, again, Rodrigues would have watched the entire Timol inquest in the comfort of his home in 2017. So what does this tell us about the NPA? We then go to the verdict of Judge Balimotle, Sakina, on the 12th of October, making it very clear that Rodrigues must be investigated further for his role in the murder of my uncle. We then come to the verdict of Judge Motley on the role of Seth's sons and Neville Els, two security branch officers stationed at John Foster Square Police Station, also to be investigated further. I then pursue the NPA for a period of 30 months, Sakina, finding out about the status of investigation against Els and Sons. Pertaining to Els, we had information that he had tortured Professor Kantinal Naik, who is now late. As for Seth's Sons, we had 5 affidavits coming forward, including information that was brought to us by the Deputy Secretary General of the ANC, Comrade Jessie Duarte, that she and her family were personally tortured and tormented by Seth's Sons. And this information was again brought to the attention of the National Prosecuting Authority. Late last year sometime, they finally made a decision not to charge Els and Sons. And the excuses they provided was that because of their age and the lengthy time delay and the fact that there was no evidence available at their disposal. This despite the fact that we had 5 affidavits that we had submitted. Now, under the tenor of the NDPP, Advocate Shamila Batoy, I personally have been pursuing her on the issue of charging Els and Sons. Our legal representatives at Weber Wenzel have made representation to her earlier this year that she needs to revisit that particular decision. And again, a few weeks ago, the response from her was that she was looking into it. So this is under the tenor of Advocate Shamila Batoy, Sakina. And it is a clear message that the NPA is not interested in pursuing and prosecuting apartheid-era perpetrators. And the case of Els and Sons is a practical example. So in other words, they are sending a message that even if apartheid-era perpetrators testify in the upcoming case of Dr. Hussein Hafiji, they are found guilty of perjury, the NPA has absolutely no intention of laying charges against them. And this is a serious worrying concern because Els is, I think, 84, 85, Seth's Sons is 83. And it's a mere matter of time, when they're going to pass on. And I've made it very clear to the NPA that I will hold them accountable for failing to discharge justice in the matter of Neville Els and Seth's Sons.
So this is what I want to know. How are you going to hold them accountable? Because, as you say, it was clear in the case of your uncle, Ahmed Timol, that there seemed to have been no effort to try and locate those implicated. You found them. Anyone who wanted to find them could find them. I personally looked at an address and knew exactly where he was. But they indicated they could not find the person. So going forward, why would they be moved to actually prosecute anyone in this regard? For, as you say, Shamila Batoy was on this show on Morning Live, and she had said that she would make work of actually making sure that those 300 files handed over by the TRC would actually, be looked at. Nothing seems to have happened except for these cases where families have personally taken it upon themselves to follow through, to do the investigation at great cost. Again, for those families who do not have the financial or other resources to follow up, where does this leave them?
No, it's a very important question, and this is the question we're asking. I mean, I've been very fortunate that with the assistance of the Foundation for Human Rights, Weber Wenzels and Advocate Howard Varney, that I have legal representation. Let's not forget that Rodrigues' legal fees are being paid by you and I as taxpayers. And again, after hounding the Department of Justice, I finally managed to establish more than a year ago that his legal fees had amounted to more than 3.8 million. And there also, Advocate Ben Mina, who worked at the State Attorney's Office at the 2017 inquest, once Rodrigues was charged, resigns, goes into private practice, and then he represents Rodrigues. So that's another matter altogether. But the reality is that there's absolutely no political will. And that is why I see this press release coming out from the DPCI and from the NPA as a futile exercise. It's a damage control public relations exercise. That they wake up a morning after the SCA is scathing against them, and then they talk about families and they feel for them and the short period of time. They need to take responsibility as to what they had done since 2003. And the same Chris McAdam, who stood up the next day and was a spokesperson for Shamila Batoy, the full bench of the South Gauteng High Court was scathing on him. Because in 2019, Sakina, he then talks about political interference that prevented him from executing his duty. And yet he's supposed to serve without fear, favor, and prejudice. And then he stands up to be the spokesperson of the NDPP, and then telling us that they've decentralized cases. And that is a pure exercise to deflect from their inability and their failure to deal with TRC matters. To compound all of this, Sakina, they're proud to say that they've employed 34, 35 former apartheid-era detectives. And I heard the spokesperson of the NPA yesterday proudly saying that they will go through a vetting exercise, and the vetting exercise will clear them. So you're asking apartheid-era police officers who supported the racist apartheid regime to investigate the crimes committed by their own colleagues in a democratic South Africa under the auspices of the ruling party, the African National Congress. I mean, what sort of an insult is this to apartheid-era families who have suffered for years and decades under the apartheid regime and continue to do so in a democratic South Africa? And it's an absolute insult, and history will judge, Sakina. That is the only thing we can say. History will judge the respective ministers of justice, the deputy ministers of justice, the justice portfolio committees, the members of parliament, as to how they failed, the same comrades who were killed in the trenches with them in order to allow them to sit in the highest office of political power in democratic South Africa.
Imtiaz Cajee, we have to leave it there, but thank you so much for that latest update. Imtiaz Cajee is the nephew of former anti-apartheid activist Ahmed Timol, and this is the latest development wherein the NPA and the DPCI have indicated that they've established a dedicated unit to deal with those cases that were handed over by the TRC, and unfortunately it's been going nowhere slowly, except for the cases where the families have had to make work of it themselves. With that, let's bring you some